In the forgotten archives of the Wisconsin Diocese lies a collection of documents the Catholic Church has tried to keep buried for over 160 years. These records recount the chilling disappearances of 23 nuns from St. Mary's Convent near Lake, Michigan between the years 1854 and 1862. Though church officials have long dismissed these files as mere clerical errors or misinterpretations, a very different truth began to emerge with the discovery of sealed correspondence. Hidden within the convent's walls and covered during a routine renovation, alongside the testimonies of 3 diocesan inspectors, these private letters unveil a story so disturbing that even veteran historians have questioned whether such horrors could truly unfold behind sacred walls. What you're about to hear is the first complete account of what many believe to be the darkest chapter of religious corruption in American history, one the Church has spent a fortune ensuring the world would never know. Before we descend deeper into the tragic tale of St. Mary's Convent, I must ask, are you already feeling unsettled? If so, you're not alone. Subscribe to our channel for more historically grounded stories about America's forgotten religious secrets. Our community of mystery seekers spans all 50 states. Tell us in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? Now, return with me to the Wisconsin countryside of 1854, where this ominous tale begins. A thick morning fog clung to the shores of Lake Michigan as Bishop William Corter's carriage passed through the iron gates of what would soon become St. Mary's Convent. The Catholic Church had recently acquired the estate, a sprawling former lumber baron's mansion set amid 30 acres of dense, untouched forest. This would be the first major Catholic institution established in Wisconsin, a bold move into a largely Protestant territory. It was part of a wider strategy by the Church to expand its influence across the fast-developing American frontier, where Protestant denominations had already taken root. The estate's grand limestone mansion with 3 looming wings and a solitary bell tower stood in stark contrast to the humble wooden chapels scattered across the state. The central structure, built in 1842, featured Gothic arches and narrow, almost watchful windows. 2 wings flanked the building, one to house the nuns, the other to serve as an orphanage and infirmary. Behind it a modest chapel rose with a spire that pierced the treetops, visible for miles across the flat Midwestern plains. To many local Protestants, the arrival of black-robed nuns with thick Irish accents stirred unease. The region's settlers, German and Scandinavian, had built religious communities rooted in Lutheran and Methodist values, simple, democratic, and familiar. Catholicism, with its rigid hierarchy, elaborate rituals, and air of secrecy, felt alien and threatening. On the day of the convent's consecration, a small, watchful crowd gathered outside the estate's gates. Papists, muttered Elijah Hoffman, a respected elder at the nearby Lutheran church, as he watched the sisters solemnly enter the chapel. They'll bring their foreign ways, corrupt our children with their idolatry. His companion, Wilhelm Schmidt, nodded with quiet resentment. My grandfather fled Germany to escape Catholic persecution, and now they follow us here. Though not universal, this suspicion would simmer beneath the surface, fueling tensions that would eventually engulf St. Mary's in tragedy. Inside the chapel, Bishop Corter addressed the assembled clergy and a few curious onlookers. His Boston accent echoed beneath the stone arches. St. Mary's shall be a beacon of God's mercy in this wilderness, he proclaimed. Sunlight filtered through the chapel's simple stained-glass windows, casting gentle rainbows across the pews. Under the leadership of Mother Superior Catherine Murphy, the bishop promised this convent would serve orphans, aid widows, and offer healing to the sick. Standing beside him were the 3 women tasked with leading this spiritual outpost: Mother Catherine, Sister Elizabeth Foster, and Sister Margaret Clarkitch, chosen from established Eastern convents. Mother Catherine cut an imposing figure. At 42, she carried herself with quiet authority, her posture disciplined, her gaze unwavering. Her crisp black habit flowed like ink in the light. Her hands, raised in prayer, were elegant but strong, capable of comforting a child one moment and disciplining a defiant novice the next. Those who met her often commented on her eyes. A pale, blue and naturally pale, one cleric later wrote, the kind of eyes that seem to see through lies and into your soul. The Bishop of Boston spoke highly of her, Bishop Corter announced. Her work at St. Augustine's prepared her well for the rigors of frontier religious life. At her side stood Sister Elizabeth, age 38, chosen to oversee the orphanage. With her round face, rosy cheeks, and gentle hands, she radiated maternal warmth. Her soft voice and ever-present smile soothed the children in her care. When she spoke, it was with a slight pause, as if weighing each word with care, a habit many mistook for thoughtfulness, though some would later call it calculation. Sister Margaret, 35, was appointed to establish the infirmary. Tall, slender, and serious, she moved with the exactness of someone who measured medicine by the drop. Her dark eyes missed nothing, and her reputation reached beyond the convent walls. Doctors from Boston and New York had praised her deep knowledge of both herbal remedies and modern medicine. They were joined by 20 younger nuns, most barely out of their 20s and newly arrived from Ireland. Their habits were crisp, heads bowed in reverence. As Bishop Quarter blessed each one by name: Sister Agnes O'Connor, Sister Bernadette Walsh, Sister Teresa Donovan, Sister Mary Collins. They had left behind family and homeland to answer a divine call in a strange, often hostile land. Though solemn during the ceremony, now and then their expressions revealed flickers of uncertainty when they thought no one was watching. That first night, Mother Catherine spoke to her sisters in the refectory. "The Lord has called us to this wilderness," she said, her voice echoing in the dim light of flickering candles. The scent of fresh bread and weak tea lingered in the air. Despite the large hearth, the chill of the Wisconsin autumn seeped through the stone walls. "We will face hardships unknown to our eastern counterparts," she continued. "We will encounter fear and suspicion, but through devotion and sacrifice, we shall endure." The young nuns listened intently, clinging to her words like a lifeline. Later, as they settled into the dormitory rows of narrow cots, separated by little more than an arm's length, Sister Agnes whispered to Sister Bernadette, "You think the locals will ever accept us?" Her voice trembled slightly. Sister Bernadette reached across the small space and squeezed her hand. "They feared our Lord too, at first," she whispered. "We'll show them we mean only good through what we do, not just what we say." Their conversation ended abruptly as footsteps echoed down the hall. Mother Catherine on her nightly rounds, ensuring order on their first night. In the weeks that followed, the convent of St. Mary's quickly became a functioning religious community. The rhythm of the day began with matins at 3 a.m., the chapel bells cutting through the darkness and summoning weary souls to prayer. 7 times a day, Latin chants echoed through the stone walls, becoming as much a part of the landscape as the wind in the pines or the distant lowing of cattle. Between prayers, the sisters worked tirelessly. They ran an orphanage, tended the sick in a modest infirmary, and cultivated large vegetable gardens. Theirs was a life of prayer, labor, and simplicity designed to focus the mind on God and service rather than self. By the winter of 1854, the orphanage housed 12 children, many the sons and daughters of Irish laborers who had perished in logging or railroad accidents. Sister Elizabeth cared for them with gentle authority, teaching them letters, numbers, and Catholic doctrine. On Sundays, families would visit after Mass, sometimes bringing small gifts or inquiring about adoption. Sister Margaret's infirmary began with humble means but quickly earned respect. Her remedies, poultices for inflammation, teas for fever, compresses for chest ailments, proved indispensable during the brutal winter when travel to town doctors became dangerous. Her success, paired with the nuns' self-sufficiency, began to shift local opinion. "They keep to themselves," admitted Elijah Hoffman to his congregation, "but they do good work. Their ways aren't ours, but maybe God allows for more than one path to heaven in this country." Among them was 23-year-old Sister Agnes O'Connor, one of the youngest at St. Mary's. Her letters, preserved in the archives of the Dublin Diocese, offer a rare and intimate portrait of life in the early days of the convent, a voice echoing from the past. Speaking of courage, faith, and quiet resilience in a new world, her careful handwriting filled page after page with reflections on her new life. Yet for those who read closely, the tone began to shift as the months wore on. "The work is harder than I ever imagined," she confided in a letter dated December 1854, the ink smudged by what looked like fallen tears. "My hands are raw from scrubbing linens in ice-cold water, and the chapel stones feel like frost beneath our knees during morning prayers. But Mother Catherine assures us our sacrifices please God." She wrote tenderly of her companions. "Sister Elizabeth has shown great kindness, helping me adjust to this strange land. She brings extra blankets on the coldest nights and patiently teaches me how to care for the orphans." Another entry praised Sister Margaret. "Her remedies saved us last month when fever swept through the orphanage. The children burned with such heat we feared we'd lose them all, but her tincture of willow bark and honey brought their temperatures down. I believe we are doing God's work, though I still cry myself to sleep some nights, longing for the green hills of home." But the letters revealed only part of the truth. Even Sister Agnes May not have fully grasped the quiet transformation taking place within the stone walls of St. Mary's. What had once been a strictly guided life under Mother Catherine was hardening into something more rigid, more severe. Minor breaches of convent rules once met with soft correction now drew harsh penances. In January 1855, Sister Josephine Brady's hands trembled as she tried to mend a tear in her habit. She had coughed during silent prayer and, for that transgression, was ordered to kneel on dried peas and recite the entire rosary. Her knees were left bleeding and swollen. Sister Mary Collins helped her thread a needle, their eyes meeting in silent understanding until Mother Catherine's voice pierced the stillness. Do not draw attention to her weakness. She had entered without a sound, a habit that increasingly unnerved the younger sisters. Discipline is the cornerstone of devotion. All of you should remember that. By spring 1855, the world outside viewed St. Mary's as a haven of compassion. When a measles epidemic struck the nearby lumber camps, Sister Margaret's infirmary welcomed the sick regardless of their faith. Donations arrived from grateful families. Even Protestant ministers praised the convent's charity. Yet within those walls, a quiet unease grew. Meals, once occasions for shared warmth, became hushed affairs. The recreation hour turned solemn. Young women who had crossed oceans together now moved like shadows, careful and quiet. Then, in April, something unusual happened. Sister Agnes did not appear for morning prayers. Her absence stood out at once, a single space, unfilled in the neat chapel formation. Concerned glances passed among the nuns as Mother Catherine entered. Sister Agnes has been called to serve our mission in Minnesota, she announced at breakfast. Her voice allowed no questions. Her departure was sudden, as such divine callings often are. We shall pray for her success. Sister Bernadette's spoon clattered against her bowl. But Mother, she said nothing to me. And she stopped short as Mother Catherine's pale gaze locked onto her. Are you suggesting, she asked coolly, that a bride of Christ must seek the permission of her peers rather than her superiors before answering God's call? No. Mother, forgive me, Sister Bernadette murmured, lowering her eyes. No one had seen Agnes pack or say goodbye. She had mentioned nothing of a transfer in her letters. But in the rigid structure of convent life, no one dared challenge the official explanation. That night in the dormitory, the sisters noticed her things were gone: her prayer book, the wooden rosary her mother had given her, the woolen stockings, for Wisconsin winters, all gone, as though she had truly departed. But Sister Mary Collins, who had slept beside Agnes, whispered during a rare moment alone in the garden to Sister Teresa Donovan, her voice barely audible over the wind. Her cloak still hung on its peg. Would she have left without it, especially in April, in Minnesota? Sister Teresa glanced nervously toward the convent windows. Perhaps she was given a new one for the journey, she offered, though doubt clouded her voice. We should not speculate, Sister, came the curt reply. 3 months later, Sister Bernadette Walsh vanished in the same mysterious manner. The bishop has requested Sister Bernadette's assistance with a delicate matter in Chicago, Mother Catherine explained. She left before dawn to catch the early train. No farewell, no warning, just an empty cell and a hasty explanation. This time, during work period, Sister Elizabeth expanded on the narrative. Sister Bernadette showed such skill with the orphans that the bishop has asked her to help establish procedures at the new foundling home in Chicago. Her voice held the expected pride and pious acceptance. But Sister Mary noticed her eyes, usually warm and kind, were cold and distant. By the winter of 1855, 3 more nuns had been transferred to distant missions. Each departure followed a familiar pattern. A young nun, often noted for her beauty or gentle spirit, would simply not appear one morning. Later, Mother Catherine would announce her reassignment, always to a far-off location, one that could not be easily verified. Letters from anxious families to these new locations would be returned months later. The responses were always brief, oddly formal, and revealed little about the sisters' new life. Years later, handwriting experts would confirm a disturbing truth. All those replies had been written by the same hand, not by the nuns themselves. Among the few brave enough to question the trend was Sister Teresa Donovan. Tall and strong from years of farm labor before taking her vows, she had already drawn Mother Catherine's disapproval for challenging the increasingly harsh penances imposed on younger nuns. It seems strange that Rome would request so many transfers without proper documentation, she whispered one summer afternoon in 1856, as she and Sister Mary Collins worked in the garden, hands stained with soil from early carrots. The garden had expanded that year. A new section behind a high fence off limits to all but Sister Margaret and Mother Catherine was dedicated to medicinal herbs. And have you noticed, Sister Teresa continued, her Irish brogue thickening with distress, it's always the youngest and the prettiest who are called away. First Agnes, with her golden hair, then Bernadette with her angelic singing voice, Catherine, with her perfect complexion, Josephine with her. She stopped suddenly as a shadow fell across the garden. Sister Mary hushed her quickly, eyes darting to the convent windows where Sister Margaret stood, watching. Her face was pale and unreadable. Mother Catherine has her reasons, Mary whispered. We must trust her wisdom. A week later, Sister Teresa was gone, called to a contemplative retreat in Montreal, Mother Catherine announced at morning prayers. That evening, Sister Mary found a torn page from Sister Teresa's prayer book tucked beneath her pillow. A message had been hastily scribbled in the margin. Something is wrong. If I disappear, tell Father Ryan. The ink was still fresh. Sight of her friend's handwriting sent a chill through her, a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn wind slipping through the stone walls. By 1857, the pattern could no longer be ignored. Of the original 20 junior nuns, only 12 remained. The official explanations continued missions, retreats, disease assignments. Outwardly, St. Mary's functioned as always. Locals brought their sick to Sister Margaret's infirmary. Orphans received care from Sister Elizabeth. Sunday visitors saw nothing unusual in the solemn lines of black-clad women moving from chapel to garden to refectory. But within those limestone walls, fear had taken root. The sisters spoke in whispers. They avoided being alone, and they watched. In growing terror as their numbers slowly diminished, Mother Catherine's leadership became iron-fisted. Minor rule violations brought harsh punishments, extended fasts, sleepless nights in cold prayer rooms, and public confessions of deeply personal sins. Sister Claire O'Donnell was caught with a small piece of chocolate sent by her family. She was forced to kneel before the entire community and confess to gluttony and deception, unworthy of a bride of Christ, Mother Catherine declared. Claire was sentenced to 3 days of fasting, only water, and a single piece of bread each. Evening. And still, the sisters continued to vanish. But when Sister Claire collapsed during chapel prayers on the second day, it was Sister Margaret who revived her with a vial of smelling salts. Her thin lips curved in what some would later describe as a smile. One particularly bitter night in January 1858, Sister Mary Collins was startled awake by muffled sounds coming from the cell next to hers. Through the thin wall, she could hear Sister Rebecca Murphy weeping soft, stifled sobs followed by a harsh whisper that froze Mary's blood. You will come with us now. Make any noise and you'll regret it. It was Mother Catherine's voice. Footsteps followed, 3 sets, slow, measured, moving away from Sister Rebecca's room. Then came the sound that would haunt Sister Mary's dreams for years, a muffled cry, swiftly silenced, and the unmistakable drag of a body no longer moving of its own will. The next morning Mother Catherine stood before them, hands folded, eyes pale and unreadable. Sister Rebecca has been called to serve at a frontier mission in the Dakota Territory, she announced. The native children require instruction, and Sister Rebecca's patience with orphans has prepared her well for this sacred task. Her gaze lingered on Sister Mary a moment too long. We shall miss her gentle presence, she continued, but rejoice in God's purpose for her talents. Sister Mary, trembling, forced herself through morning prayers. Her rosary clicked between shaking fingers, each word of devotion tangled with dread. What had happened to Sister Rebecca? What had happened to the others? That afternoon, while sweeping the hallway outside Mother Catherine's office, she overheard something chilling. The heavy oak door had not shut completely, and the voices inside carried clearly. The doctor says this one will fetch a higher price, came the voice of Sister Elizabeth. Once soft-spoken and kind, her tone was now cold, unfamiliar. He says men pay extra for the innocent ones. We need to be more careful with the timing, Sister Margaret replied, the sound of clinking glass suggesting she was preparing medicine. 3 in 1 month raises suspicion. The bishop's secretary mentioned it in his last letter. Mother Catherine laughed a sharp, dismissive sound. The bishop is easily managed. Another donation to his cathedral fund, and his concerns disappear. Besides, we've established a reliable pattern. No one questions nuns being sent to frontier missions or falling ill during their service. What about the Collins girl? Sister Margaret asked, her voice dropping. She watches too closely. I've seen her listening at doors. A long pause followed. We'll wait, Mother Catherine said finally. She's too plain to bring much. And there's that correspondence with her brother in the seminary. Too many disappearances at once draws attention. Rebecca will keep the doctor's clients satisfied for now. Sister Mary fled before they discovered her. Her heart pounded. The pieces were falling into a terrible pattern. The youngest and prettiest sisters always vanishing first. The visits from wealthy men escorted personally by Mother Catherine. The locked north wing. The growing affluence of a convent supposedly dedicated to poverty. She didn't sleep that night. By dawn, her mind made up, Sister Mary took her only chance. During her weekly task, collecting eggs from the chicken coop, the only time she was allowed outside unsupervised, she slipped a folded note into the coat pocket of Jimmy Fletcher, the milkman's 12-year-old son. The boy's eyes widened when she brushed his arm. She had never spoken to him before. "Please take this to Father Thomas at St. Joseph's Church," she whispered. Then, pressing a small silver cross into his hand, the only valuable thing she owned, she added, "Tell no one, lives depend on it." Jimmy nodded solemnly, freckles pale, eyes wide with understanding. "Yes, sister, I promise. Something evil is happening at St. Mary's. The nuns are not being sent away as claimed. They are disappearing. I fear for my life. Please send help." Sister Mary Collins, Father Thomas Ryan, a young Irish priest, had long harbored suspicions about Mother Catherine. During his monthly visits to the convent to say Mass, he had noticed the number of nuns steadily declining. Each time, Mother Catherine offered vague, contradictory explanations, but as a humble parish priest, Ryan lacked the authority to challenge a Mother Superior, especially one as respected and well-connected as Catherine Murphy. Now, in his modest study, Father Ryan paced anxiously, the worn floorboards creaking beneath his steps. He read and reread Sister Mary's desperate message. A silver confirmation cross tucked in with the note lay heavy in his palm. It was not something a nun would part with lightly. The urgency in the letter, combined with his own unease, made one thing clear: he had to act. But what could he do? Rather than confront Mother Catherine directly, Father Ryan chose a more cautious route. He made the arduous journey to Milwaukee to speak with his superior, Bishop John Henney. The trip took a full day on horseback. The late winter roads alternating between patches of ice and deep, clinging mud. By the time he arrived, his cassock was caked with filth, but his resolve remained firm. Bishop Henney received him in a richly appointed studio world apart from Ryan's humble lodgings. The bishop, animated, first spoke at length about the ongoing construction of Milwaukee's Grand St. John's Cathedral, unfurling architectural sketches with pride. "It will be the finest cathedral west of New York," he declared in a thick German accent. "A monument to our faith in this Protestant wilderness." Father Ryan nodded politely, waiting for an opening. When the bishop finally inquired about his parish, Ryan carefully explained his concerns: the vanishing nuns, the lack of documentation, and finally, the cryptic plea from Sister Mary. The bishop's demeanor shifted. The warmth in his eyes faded, replaced by a guarded stillness. He set the silver cross aside without even examining it. "These are serious allegations, Father," he said coolly. "Mother Catherine has already explained each of these transfers to my satisfaction, but, Your Excellency, 8 nuns in less than 3 years. No transfer records, no letters, no word from them once they've left. The frontier missions are in constant need of educated women," the bishop replied curtly, rising to signal the meeting's end. "We mustn't entertain rumors that could damage the church's standing in this fragile region. Mother Catherine has been instrumental in our cathedral's funding. Her leadership is unquestioned." As the bishop led him to the door, he added, his voice stern, "Attend to your parish, Father Ryan. Leave convent affairs to those divinely appointed." Disheartened but not defeated, Father Ryan returned home with a deeper resolve. If the proper channels would not intervene, he would find another path. That chance came in March of 1858. Bishop Henney assigned him the task of collecting financial records from parishes and religious institutions across the diocese. It was the perfect cover to revisit St. Mary's and investigate further. On a cold, blustery day, Father Ryan arrived at the convent. Something felt off. The gardens, once neat and blooming with spring's first colors, were overgrown. The windows were dim, and the convent's bell, which used to mark every hour with clarity, now rang infrequently, its tone dull and hollow. Sister Elizabeth met him at the door. Her usual cheerful demeanor had faded. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her habit, normally immaculate, was uncharacteristically untidy. "Father Ryan, we weren't expecting you today," she said, her voice edged with nervousness. "Mother Catherine is indisposed. She led him not to the warm study where he usually met with the Mother Superior, but to a cold, sparsely furnished parlor. The chill in the room mirrored the one settling into Father Ryan's heart. Something was very wrong at St. Mary's. Asks that you leave the diocesan documents and forms, Sister Elizabeth said calmly, and she complete them by week's end. I'm afraid the bishop was quite clear, Father Ryan replied. Removing his coat and placing his briefcase deliberately on the table, he tried to project the authority of his office, though he knew his youth and modest standing within the church worked against him. I'm to review the records personally this year. Financial irregularities have surfaced in multiple institutions. Sister Elizabeth's pleasant smile disappeared. That won't be possible today. Our bookkeeper, Sister Margaret, is tending to a dying child in the infirmary. Then I shall wait, Father Ryan said, settling more firmly into his chair. Or perhaps I could tour the convent while I do. It's been some time since I've seen the improvements to the orphanage. I've heard much about them. A flicker of something anger crossed Sister Elizabeth's face before it vanished. As you wish, Father, though I must ask that you avoid the north wing. We have several cases of influenza and wouldn't want you exposed. The north wing, the area he'd never been allowed to enter, supposedly reserved for the sisters' private quarters. His suspicion grew as he toured the grounds. Father Ryan quickly noticed troubling inconsistencies. The convent, reportedly housing 20 orphans, according to Mother Catherine's recent letters, seemed to shelter only 7 thin, wide-eyed children who looked more frightened than cared for. When he approached a small girl sweeping the dormitory floor to speak with her, Sister Elizabeth intervened at once, sending the child off on an errand. The infirmary, which supposedly treated dozens of local patients, contained only 3 elderly residents, none of whom showed any signs of influenza, and Sister Margaret, supposedly attending to a dying child, was nowhere to be seen. Most unsettling of all was the sudden disappearance of many nuns. Just 3 months earlier, Father Ryan had celebrated Mass at St. Mary's and recalled seeing 15 sisters present. Now, there were only 8. When he asked about Sister Rebecca, Sister Josephine, Sister Claire, the answers were all the same: transfers, special assignments, missions, and Sister Mary Collins. He asked casually, as they passed the laundry where 2 nuns worked silently at steaming washtubs, their hands red and raw. Sister Elizabeth's step faltered. She's been reassigned to our mission in St. Louis, just last week, in fact. Her experience with the orphans made her an ideal candidate. Father Ryan nodded slowly, concealing his alarm. Sister Mary Collins, the one who had written the anonymous, desperate letter, was now among the missing, now fully alert. He requested to visit the chapel before leaving. Once pristine, the sacred space showed signs of neglect. A thin layer of dust on the altar rail, tarnished candlesticks, wilting flowers. The silence felt oppressive. Where once 23 nuns had gathered in prayer, there was now only absence, a hollow stillness that unsettled even the stones. As Sister Elizabeth was distracted by a novice delivering a message, Father Ryan quietly slipped through a side door that led to the residential wing. The corridor was unnervingly quiet for mid-afternoon. Most of the cells stood empty, belongings gone abandoned or cleared out. As he turned to leave, a faint sound stopped. A whimper, a muffled groan, coming from behind a heavy wooden door at the end of the hallway. This door was different, reinforced with iron. Locked. He stepped closer, listening. The sound came again, human, frightened. Is someone there? He whispered through the keyhole. Do you need help? Silence. Then a hoarse female voice. Father. Father, is that you? Please. Help us, please. Before he could respond, a voice cut through the corridor like a blade. Father Ryan. He turned. Mother Catherine stood behind him, flanked by Sister Margaret and a large man he didn't recognize. He wasn't clergy or staff. He wore the rough clothing of a laborer, his arms thick as tree trunks, his face fixed in a hostile scowl. This area is strictly cloistered, Mother Catherine said coldly. Your presence here is highly inappropriate. Forgive me, Mother, Father Ryan stammered, forcing calm into his voice. I lost my way after leaving the chapel. Her pale eyes studied him. She looked thinner than he remembered, her habit hanging loosely, but her authority was undiminished, if anything, sharpened. This wing is reserved for sisters under special spiritual direction. Their seclusion is essential to their vocation. I heard someone calling for help, Father Ryan said, standing his ground. Mother Catherine did not flinch, but behind her, the man's expression darkened, and Sister Margaret's hands clenched tightly at her sides. You heard Sister Anne during her spiritual exercises, Sister Margaret said smoothly, stepping in without missing a beat. Some of our more devout sisters practice mortification of the flesh. Their cries can be misunderstood by those unfamiliar with advanced forms of devotion. Mother Catherine turned to a broad-shouldered man standing nearby. Mr. Callahan will see you. Out, she said curtly. We'll have the financial report sent to Milwaukee by the end of the week. The man named Callahan moved forward. His stance made it clear he was more than just a porter. He was someone used to enforcing Mother Catherine's will, with methods far from spiritual. This way, Father, he said. His voice held a strained politeness, but the iron grip on Father Ryan's arm betrayed a darker intent as he was led away. Father Ryan cast one last glance at the locked door of the place where the voice had spoken to him. What did she mean by us? How many women were locked away behind that door? The moment his buggy passed through the convent gates, Father Ryan lashed the reins, sending his horse into a gallop. His thoughts raced faster than the hooves, pounding the dirt. The voice, the locked door, the missing nuns, the terrified children, and the intimidating Mr. Callahan or signs, pointed to something deeply sinister inside St. Mary's. This was no longer within the scope of a simple parish priest. Without informing Bishop Henehum, he now suspected of complicity or, at best, dangerous ignorance. Father Ryan sent an urgent telegram to Archbishop John Hughes in New York. Grave concerns regarding St. Mary's Convent, Wisconsin, suspicious disappearances of nuns, evidence of imprisonment, possible endangerment of remaining sisters. Local bishop unresponsive. Request immediate diocesan investigation. Father Thomas Ryan, St. Joseph's Parish. If you're feeling a chill down your spine as this story unfolds, you're not alone. Many in our mystery-loving community report strange reactions to these dark historical accounts. Take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who loves true historical mysteries. Your engagement helps us continue uncovering the buried secrets of America's past. Now, let's return to the spring of 1858. A storm was brewing over St. Mary's Convent, and what it would reveal was far more horrifying than anyone could imagine. Archbishop Hughes, known for his uncompromising discipline, acted swiftly. Instead of alerting Bishop Heney, he sent his personal secretary, Monsignor Patrick Kelly, to conduct a surprise inspection. On April 17, 1858, Monsignor Kelly arrived unannounced at the convent gates, flanked by Father Ryan and two senior priests from nearby parishes. The morning was clear and mild, the kind of spring day that brought hope to Wisconsin's farmers. But as the party approached St. Mary's, a heavy unease hung over the stone buildings. Ravens circled the bell tower, their harsh cries cutting through the silence like a warning. The welcome they received was telling. Mother Catherine, typically composed and commanding, appeared visibly shaken. Her face had gone pale, save for the flush of either anger or fear as she recognized the Monsignor's official robes and the sealed documents he carried. Inside, chaos reigned. Nuns hurried through the halls in a state of quiet panic. From an open window, Father Ryan saw two young sisters rushing armfuls of papers toward the kitchen. The scent of burning parchment drifted into the courtyard. The stove blazed despite the warm day. "This is highly irregular," Monsignor Mother Catherine said, her voice now brittle and strained. "We have established protocols. Bishop Heney always gives us weeks of notice for such visitations, which is exactly why Archbishop Hughes instructed me to come unannounced," Monsignor Kelly replied calmly. In his 50s, with silvered hair and the weathered face of a man familiar with both peace and war, the Monsignor exuded a quiet authority. He held up a letter bearing the Archbishop's seal. "I am authorized to conduct a full inspection of this institution, its records, its buildings, and its residents. I expect your full cooperation." Mother Catherine's eyes flicked toward Sister Margaret, who stood partly hidden in a nearby doorway, her face a mask of unreadable emotion. Some silent exchange seemed to pass between them before Mother Catherine turned back with a strained smile. "Of course, Monsignor, St. Mary's has nothing to hide. However, I must insist that you respect the sacred enclosure of our cloistered sisters. Some are engaged in spiritual disciplines that must not be interrupted. My authority extends to every part of this convent," declared Monsignor Kelly as he unfolded the Archbishop's letter and held it before Mother Catherine. "No exceptions." What followed was an investigation that would later be described in Monsignor Kelly's 40-page report as uncovering a tableau of horrors unlike anything seen in the modern church. The inspection team divided. Father Ryan accompanied Monsignor Kelly to the locked residential wing, while the other priests began interviewing the visible sisters and reviewing the convent's financial records. As they neared the north wing, they were confronted by Sister Elizabeth standing rigidly in the corridor. Her normally gentle expression had hardened. "Mother Catherine has forbidden entrance to this section," she said firmly. "The sisters here are in spiritual retreat." "Sister Elizabeth," Monsignor Kelly said gently but authoritatively, "I speak with the full authority of Archbishop Hughes. Open this door, or I will be forced to consider your defiance a violation of your sacred vow of obedience." Sister Elizabeth's composure cracked. Her voice dropped to a whisper tinged with fear. "You don't understand what you're doing. He will be most displeased." Father Ryan asked. "Do you mean Bishop Henny?" She shook her head, eyes flicking nervously toward the windows as if expecting someone, or something, to appear. After a moment's hesitation, she stepped aside. The locked door was opened under threat of ecclesiastical censure, revealing a nightmarish scene. The room, once a storage space no more than 15 feet across, now held 5 nuns, including the long-missing Sister Rebecca. The space was bare, save for thin, filthy pallets and a single chamber pot in the corner. The high window had been boarded shut, plunging the room into near-complete darkness. Only the light from the open door now illuminated the pale, emaciated women inside. Their habits were torn, their faces gaunt with hunger and terror. One of them, later identified as Sister Josephine Brady, was heavily pregnant, her swollen belly disturbingly out of place on her skeletal frame. The stench of unwashed bodies and human waste was suffocating. Father Ryan recoiled, struggling against a wave of nausea, while Monsignor Kelly made the sign of the cross. "In the name of all that is holy," he whispered, "what has happened here?" Sister Rebecca, once vibrant and cheerful, now rose unsteadily to her feet, little more than a husk of her former self. "Father Ryan," she rasped, her voice dry and cracked, "you came back." As he helped her to a chair brought hastily from the hallway, she leaned in and whispered, "They're preparing us for the doctor, for the house in Chicago." "What doctor?" Monsignor Kelly asked, kneeling beside her despite his age and office. "What house?" "Dr. Matthews," she replied, trembling. "He comes to examine us, to see who is suitable. The men pay more for nuns. Brides of Christ, Mother Catherine calls us." As the 2 clergy members tended to the imprisoned women, providing food, water, and summoning medical help, the other priests uncovered equally horrifying discoveries. Elsewhere in the convent. In Sister Margaret's private quarters, accessed only through a concealed door behind the infirmary, they found shelves of questionable medicines, laudanum, chloroform, and other sedatives. A leather-bound journal described treatments administered to various sisters, coldly noting their responses and their suitability for transport. Meanwhile, the financial investigators unearthed glaring irregularities. Though the convent claimed to subsist on modest donations and manual labor, its ledgers showed frequent, large cash deposits far beyond what such a place could legally earn. More disturbing were coded entries referring to packages delivered and commissions completed, each aligning with the disappearance of a nun. One entry read, "Transferred, Sister Agnes O'Connor, May 1855, commission, $400 package delivered to Chicago establishment, condition, excellent." Another was more chilling, "Sister Teresa Donovan, unsuitable for transfer, resisted, terminated, November 1856, no commission." As the investigation progressed, a grotesque pattern emerged, one of systematic abuse, trafficking, and betrayal of sacred vows. Through patient and compassionate questioning, Monsignor Kelly began to piece together the full extent of the unspeakable horrors hidden behind the convent's holy facade. Mother Catherine, Sister Elizabeth, and Sister Margaret were never true servants of the Church. They were impostors, master manipulators who had infiltrated the Catholic system. Years earlier, under false identities, the truth began to unravel when Sister Claire O'Donnell, one of the rescued nuns, finally felt safe enough to testify. "I overheard them one night," she whispered, wrapped in a blanket, despite the warm room. Mother Catherine was arguing with Sister Margaret. She called her Catherine, not Mother. She said they'd come too far to be exposed now, that they'd changed identities before and could do it again if they had to. It was later revealed that the real Mother Catherine Murphy had died shortly after arriving in Wisconsin, poisoned, according to testimony from Sister Margaret's former assistant in the infirmary. She had added something to Mother Catherine's evening tea. That very night, the elder nun began vomiting blood. Sister Margaret quickly diagnosed it as consumption and ordered her isolated. No one was allowed to care for her in her final days. With the true Mother Catherine out of the way, the three women assumed control of the convent. What they built under the guise of piety was a horrific criminal network chain of so-called houses of charity across the Midwest. In reality, there were brothels catering to wealthy men with twisted desires, young nuns who caught their eyes. Those who were beautiful, innocent, or especially gentle were marked. First, they would be subjected to harsh punishments for imaginary sins, cutting them off from the others. Then came the drugging, often with laudanum supplied by Sister Margaret. These young women were then sold violated in the convent itself by wealthy benefactors from cities like Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Louis. They came under the cover of darkness. After compline the hour of silent prayer, they paid extra if we wore our habits during it. Sister Rebecca testified, her voice cold, detached, perhaps the only way she could speak the unspeakable. Mother Catherine would lead them to the north wing, where we were kept. Those who became pregnant, like Sister Josephine, were hidden until delivery, then sent to city brothels where their religious purity and forced motherhood were marketed as exotic perversions. Most didn't survive long. Sister Margaret tracked each girl's cycle meticulously. If someone missed her bleeding, she would laugh and say, "She'll be especially valuable now." Men paid more for those carrying children. Sister Rebecca explained, even the convent's orphanage was a front. Older girls nearing puberty were adopted by so-called benefactors, sold into the same network. The boys weren't spared either, sent off as unpaid farmhands, while Mother Catherine collected placement fees. The worst fate was reserved for those who resisted or tried to speak out. Sister Teresa Donovan had dared to question the rising number of disappearances. Officials claimed she had been sent to Montreal, but Sister Rebecca revealed the truth. Teresa had been locked in a hidden room, assaulted repeatedly. When she wouldn't break, she was strangled by a man known only as Callahan. Mother Catherine made us watch, Sister Claire recalled, tears streaking her cheeks. She said it was a lesson in obedience. Sister Teresa was still praying the rosary. Even as the rope tightened, her body and those of at least 3 others were buried in shallow, unmarked graves in the convent's vegetable garden. On a grim April evening, Monsignor Kelly ordered the immediate closure of St. Mary's. The surviving nuns were removed for their safety. Local authorities were summoned, and guards posted to prevent escape or evidence removal. Mother Catherine, Sister Margaret, and Sister Elizabeth were placed under ecclesiastical arrest, confined to their cells to await civil prosecution. "I was only following orders," Sister Elizabeth whimpered. Mother Catherine said it was God's will, that the money was for the church. Mother Catherine remained silent, her pale eyes betraying nothing. Only Sister Margaret showed emotion, a cold, knowing smile playing on her lips as she was led away. "You understand nothing of what you've discovered," she said. She told Monsieur Kelly, "We serve a higher purpose than you can imagine." But the church's attempt to handle the matter discreetly, quickly unraveled. Mr. Callahan, the burly enforcer, who had been notably absent during the inspection, returned after nightfall. Upon discovering the convent under guard, he fled to Chicago, apparently to warn his associates. By the time local sheriffs arrived the next morning with arrest warrants, Mother Catherine and Sister Margaret had already vanished from their locked quarters. Only Sister Elizabeth remained, found kneeling in the chapel, frozen in a catatonic state. "The window was still locked from the inside," reported the priest who had been guarding Mother Catherine's room, "and the door showed no signs of being forced. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, more likely." The convent's long history and its original use as a lumber baron's mansion had provided hidden passages and escape routes unknown even to church authorities. Such secret exits may have been installed for illicit meetings or emergency getaways common during the rough days of the frontier. The civil investigation that followed revealed the full scope of the operation. Financial records seized from a concealed safe in Mother Catherine's chambers documented over $100,000 in illicit transactions, equivalent to nearly $3 million today, spanning 8 years. Coded ledgers identified 23 nuns and 17 orphaned girls, trafficked to brothels across the Midwest. Correspondence with business partners in Chicago, St. Louis, and New Orleans detailed the specialized services offered and the premium prices they commanded. One letter to a Chicago brothel owner read, "A genuine sister of charity, untouched before our establishment, minimum $300. Special requests, habit, religious implements, and additional $50 per session. Pregnant sisters command $500 from exclusive patrons." The most damning evidence was discovered sewn into the mattress of Sister Elizabeth's bed, a small leather-bound notebook. Inside were dates, names, and chilling accounts of each disappeared nun. Some entries were cold and clinical. Sister Agnes delivered to Chicago. Operation September 1855, valued at $400. Others revealed a disturbing pleasure in the cruelty. Sister Teresa fought magnificently. Callahan enjoyed subduing her. Buried east corner of Beanfield, November 1856. The notebook also mentioned a physician, Dr. William Matthews, a once respected doctor from Chicago whose career had ended in disgrace following allegations of inappropriate conduct with female patients. According to the entries, Dr. Matthews had conducted medical examinations on the nuns, certifying their health and most disturbingly their virginity, which significantly increased their value in the sex trade. Dr. M confirms Sister Rebecca suitable for premium placement. One note read, recommends maximum usage before transfer to ensure obedience in the Chicago establishment. Guided by cryptic references in the notebook, authorities excavated parts of the convent's vegetable garden. Among the bean plants and herbs, they unearthed the remains of 4 nuns buried in shallow graves. Though forensic methods were primitive by modern standards, examination confirmed the cause of death, strangulation. One victim, identified as Sister Mary Collins by a small medallion of St. Bridget found with her, appeared to have been buried more recently. The soil over her grave was still soft, suggesting she had been murdered just before or during Father Ryan's ill-fated visit, possibly after delivering the note that exposed the entire conspiracy. Sister Elizabeth Fosterborn Margaret Wilson was the only one of the 3 leaders ever brought to justice. Declared mentally unfit to stand trial, she was committed to the Wisconsin State Asylum, where she died in 1863, having never spoken another word. Her medical records describe her as catatonic by day, screaming only at night about the master coming to punish her betrayal. Mother Catherine Murphy, real name still unknown, and Sister Margaret Clark, later identified as Catherine Donovan, no relation to the murdered Sister Teresa, disappeared completely. Unconfirmed sightings placed them in New Orleans and then Havana, where rumors claimed they continued similar operations targeting young immigrant women. Despite a nationwide alert and distribution of their descriptions to law enforcement agencies, they were never apprehended. Mother Catherine was described as a woman of around 45 years, standing 5 feet 8 inches tall, with striking blue eyes and graying brown hair. She spoke with a faint Boston accent and carried herself with commanding authority. Sister Margaret, said to be near 40, was taller at 5 feet 10 inches, with a gaunt frame, piercing dark eyes, and jet black hair streaked prematurely with gray. Her speech was crisp and clinical, marked by a precise use of medical terminology. Despite these vivid descriptions and a generous reward offered by both civil authorities and the church, the 2 women vanished without a trace into the vast American frontier. From time to time, sightings were reported to women matching their appearance seen boarding a steamboat in New Orleans or running a finishing school for girls in Havana. But by the time authorities arrived, they had already disappeared. Months later, a man identified as James Callahan of Chicago, known associate of the operation, was arrested during a brothel raid. He killed a police officer in the struggle and was executed shortly thereafter. Before his hanging, Callahan confirmed many details about the operations at St. Mary's, but claimed he had no knowledge of the whereabouts of its leaders. They planned for this, he confided to the prison chaplain the night before his death. Mother Catherine always said they had escape routes ready. New identities. They'd done it before, changed their skins like snakes when they had to. When questioned about the mysterious figure referred to as the Master in Sister Elizabeth's writings, Callahan grew visibly agitated. Don't ask about him, he warned. He's not someone you want to know, and you definitely don't want him knowing you. To this day, the true identity of the Master, whether a symbolic delusion, a high-ranking accomplice, or something more sinister, remains one of the central unsolved mysteries of the St. Mary's case. No further evidence ever confirmed his existence beyond those cryptic references. In the aftermath, the church acted swiftly to contain the scandal. Bishop Henney was quietly transferred to a secluded monastery in Europe, where he lived out his remaining days in what official records called prayerful reflection. Yet his private letters reveal a tortured soul, tormented by guilt. In one letter from 1860, he wrote, "The blood of those poor women cries out to heaven. I cannot sleep for hearing their voices. Mother Catherine assured me the funds were for missionary work. I never questioned, God forgive me, I never questioned that convent buildings were raised. The land was sold, and the proceeds used to establish a legitimate orphanage in Milwaukee." Official church communications made no mention of the bodies discovered on the grounds or the horrors that had unfolded there. The site was deconsecrated in a private, unannounced ceremony attended only by Monsignor Kelly and Archbishop Hughes. Surviving nuns were scattered across the country, reassigned to distant convents, and forced to sign strict confidentiality agreements. Any breach of silence would result in immediate excommunication. Most complied, living out their days in quiet obedience, their trauma ignored, their suffering left unspoken. One of them, Sister Josephine Brady, gave birth just 2 months after her rescue. Though she begged to keep the child, church authorities arranged for the baby to be adopted by a Catholic family in Pennsylvania, with orders that the circumstances of her birth remain forever secret. Josephine never recovered. In 1861, she took her own life, leaving behind a note that read simply, "I cannot forget, I cannot forgive, not them, not the church, not myself. May God have mercy on us all." Another survivor, Sister Rebecca Murphy, refused silence. She left religious life, adopted the alias Rachel Martin, and in 1865 anonymously published a harrowing expose titled, "The Dark Convent." The church denounced it as Protestant slander and quickly moved to suppress it, buying and destroying nearly every copy, yet the few that survived revealed chilling details that matched the findings of the official investigation almost exactly. In her final pages, she wrote, "What happened at St. Mary's was not the work of 3 corrupt women alone. It was made possible by an institution that values silence over truth, hierarchy over humanity, reputation over justice. Until the church faces this flaw within its own soul, there will be other St. Mary's, other victims, other crimes cloaked in sacred robes." The suppression was nearly absolute, but the truth, like the voices of the women lost, refuses to stay buried. Catholic newspapers swiftly condemned the book, branding it anti-Catholic fiction and scurrilous propaganda. Protestant publishers, initially enthusiastic about a work that seemed to confirm their suspicions of Catholic institutions, soon grew wary of legal consequences. After a single print run, most ceased publication. Rachel Martin, the woman at the center of the story, vanished from public records after 1866. Some fragmented evidence suggests she may have moved to California, where she is believed to have founded a shelter for women in crisis, an early refuge for abuse survivors. If true, she carried the painful lessons of St. Mary's into a quiet life of service, one that history has largely forgotten. Father Thomas Ryan, whose determination first brought the horror of St. Mary's to light, was initially celebrated. But as the church grew increasingly anxious about the scandal's impact, Ryan was quietly reassigned to a remote parish in northern Minnesota. His private journal, discovered after his death in 1886, reveals the torment he never escaped. "I cannot forget the faces of those poor women betrayed by the very people who claim to speak for Christ. I hear their cries in my dreams. I see Sister Rebecca's hollow eyes. I wonder about the ones we never found, whose pain still echoes in hidden houses of sin. Has God forgiven us? Has He forgiven the Church for burying the truth?" His final entry, written just days before his death in January 1886, reads, 28 years since St. Mary's, and still the Church remains silent. My letters to Rome go unanswered. New bishops pretend it never happened, but it did. They were real women, with real souls. They suffered real horrors. If the Church will not speak for them, I pray someone finds this account and remembers. Remember Sister Agnes, Sister Bernadette, Sister Teresa, and all the others. Their names deserve to be spoken, their pain deserves to be acknowledged. Their lives mattered, just when it seemed the nightmare had ended. The legacy of St. Mary's spread even further. The scandal triggered widespread investigations of Catholic institutions across the Midwest. Surprise inspections were launched at convents, orphanages, and schools. While none were as extensive or as horrifying as St. Mary's, several smaller but deeply disturbing operations were uncovered. In Chicago, police raided 3 houses of charity in late 1858. They rescued 9 former nuns and 13 young women who had been forced into prostitution through coercion and manipulation. Their testimonies revealed a pattern eerily similar to St. Mary's: religious status used as a cover for trafficking, with elite clients paying a premium for access to women perceived as pure or sacred. One survivor, listed only as ML in official records, testified, "I was transferred from Wisconsin in 1856. Mother Catherine herself brought me to Madame Rousseau in Chicago and warned me that if I tried to run, both the church and the law would punish me as a fallen woman. I believed her for almost 2 years. The brothel owners implicated several high-profile figures, judges, bankers, even state legislators as clients and investors. Ledgers seized in the raids confirmed their claims. Yet the cases mysteriously unraveled, witnesses vanished, evidence disappeared. Judges issued procedural rulings that effectively shut down prosecutions. The Chicago Tribune, in a November 1858 editorial, noted, "Justice in our city appears reserved for those without powerful allies. The men named in the ledgers walk free, while the women they destroyed remain shamed and without justice." In St. Louis, the cover-up was even more aggressive. Mania Kelly, the original inspector of St. Mary's, traveled there in 1859 to investigate claims that as many as 7 missing nuns had been transported to brothels in the city. Within days of his arrival, he was brutally assaulted by unknown assailants and warned to return to New York. Though he survived the attack, Archbishop Hughes immediately recalled him, abruptly halting the investigation. Private letters between Monsignor Kelly and Archbishop Hughes unsealed in 1950 from the New York Diocese archives revealed Kelly's deep frustration. "I believe we have uncovered only the visible portion of a much greater evil. The tentacles of this operation reach into the highest echelons of society and perhaps even the Church itself. I fear powerful forces have decided this matter shall go no further." The most devastating consequences, however, were borne by the survivors. The 12 nuns rescued from St. Mary's faced traumas the Church was wholly unprepared to handle. Even those not physically harmed carried deep psychological scars from years of terror watching their sisters disappear, and in some cases, being forced under threat to participate in the abuse. Sister Claire O'Donnell, who was coerced into restraining Sister Teresa during her murder, developed what would now be recognized as severe PTSD, transferred to a convent in Philadelphia. She was frequently disciplined for screaming in her sleep and speaking out about her experiences. Eventually, she left religious life altogether. Church records indicate she was briefly institutionalized before vanishing from history. The 5 women rescued from the locked chamber sisters, Rebecca Murphy, Josephine Brady, Claire O'Donnell, Maria Fitzpatrick, and Anne Sullivan had endured the worst. Their later lives reveal the 19th century Church's inability, or unwillingness, to address trauma. Sister Josephine's suicide, following the forced separation from her child, was only the most public tragedy. Sister Maria Fitzpatrick remained within the Church but was labeled unstable and hysterical. She lived the rest of her life in a contemplative order requiring little interaction with others and died in 1870. Officially of nervous exhaustion, Sister Anne Sullivan, however, transformed her pain into quiet resistance. Bound by her vows and the Church's expectation of silence, she created informal support systems for abused nuns. After her death in 1899, her letters found in her Boston convent's archives revealed her determined spirit. "We must distinguish between the divine institution and its flawed human stewards. What happened to us was not God's will, but human evil cloaked in sacred garments. Our task is to ensure those garments cannot be stolen again." One of the most disturbing aspects of the St. Mary's case is the uncertainty surrounding the total number of victims. The Church's official investigation acknowledged 23 nuns and 17 orphaned girls confirmed as trafficked or murdered. Yet, Sister Elizabeth's notebook pointed to far more. It referenced rural acquisitions, young women abducted from isolated farms and frontier settlements, their disappearances never formally reported. Local newspaper clippings from the time tell of missing domestic servants, farm daughters who married and moved west, and widows who went east for opportunity, all possible euphemisms for victims of the trafficking network. One chilling entry from October 1857 reads, "Rural acquisitions this year, 14, superior quality, primarily Scandinavian, special commission from New Orleans fulfilled." Even more haunting is the fate of the nuns who vanished without trace. Of the 23 missing between 1854 and 1858, only 9 were ever located for found murdered and buried. At St. Mary's, 5 rescued from a brothel during later raids. The other 14 records suggest they may have been sold into operations in New Orleans, San Francisco, or even overseas. Despite scattered efforts by individual Church investigators, their fates remain unknown. A partial clue emerged in 1872 when a Catholic missionary in San Francisco reported encountering a woman in a waterfront brothel. She claimed to be Sister Catherine Walsh, once of St. Mary's Convent in Wisconsin. By the time Church authorities attempted to follow up, she had already died of typhoid fever and was buried in an unmarked grave. Whether she truly was one of the missing nuns remains unconfirmed. but the missionaries' detailed account matched the known facts of the St. Mary's case with disturbing accuracy. The most enduring mystery still surrounds two central figures, Mother Catherine Murphy and Sister Margaret Clark, the masterminds behind the operation. How had they infiltrated legitimate religious orders in the first place? Historical research suggests that Sister Margaret was actually Catherine Donovan, a woman who briefly joined a convent in Ireland but was expelled for unspecified moral misconduct. She is believed to have arrived in America in the 1840s, where she likely met her future accomplice. Together they devised a scheme to exploit the rapid growth of Catholic institutions on the American frontier as a cover for their criminal enterprise. After St. Mary's was exposed, both women vanished, triggering one of the most extensive yet discreet manhunts of the pre-Civil War era. The Church, eager to avoid scandal, handled the pursuit quietly. Sightings placed the women in New Orleans, Havana, and eventually Mexico City, always linked to religious or charitable institutions catering to wealthy elites. The final credible report came in 1863 from a former Chicago police detective, hired by the New York diocese to track them down. He claimed to have found the women in Veracruz, Mexico, running a finishing school for young ladies, one that bore all the hallmarks of their previous operation. His report, preserved in the New York diocese archives, ends with an ominous warning. I believe the women known as Murphy and Clark have re-established their enterprise under the protection of wealthy Mexican patrons. However, I was violently warned to abandon my investigation. Two local officials who had agreed to assist me were found dead the morning of our planned inspection. I can only conclude these women are shielded by powerful forces. The legacy of St. Mary's extended far beyond the immediate tragedy. Throughout the 1850s and 1860s, the case fueled growing anti-Catholic sentiment in America. Protestant publications sensationalized the events, using them as proof of moral corruption within the Catholic Church. In response, Catholic communities became more insular and defensive, ironically reinforcing the secrecy that had allowed such abuse to flourish. Even more consequential was the institutional pattern. The case established one that would repeat for generations: limited investigations, narrow accountability, targeting only low-level offenders, protection of higher authorities through silence or complicity, relocation of survivors to ensure secrecy, and ultimately, a return to normal without meaningful reform. Private correspondence between Archbishop Hughes and Vatican officials, sealed until 1975, revealed a rare moment of internal reckoning. We have removed the immediate cause of scandal and provided for the victim's care. However, I must express concern that our system of oversight contains fundamental flaws that allowed such horrors to persist unchecked. I urge a comprehensive review of how we appoint and monitor those in positions of authority. His warnings, however prescient, were quietly ignored. The Church's preference for handling such matters internally and discreetly remained intact for more than a century. As for St. Mary's itself, its physical presence has been entirely erased. The buildings were demolished, leaving no visible trace, no foundation, no plaque, no marker, only a silence where once there was a sanctuary. The land where St. Mary's Convent once stood has long since changed hands, developed into a quiet suburban neighborhood. Its residents live unaware of the atrocities buried beneath their homes. Over the decades, church records tied to the case were redacted, censored, or destroyed entirely. During the early 20th century, the most damning evidence vanished. Even the graves of the murdered nuns were left unmarked, paved over, unacknowledged, and unconsecrated, and yet the story refuses to die. Scattered across old newspaper archives, private journals, faded letters, and the oral histories passed down through generations of Wisconsin Catholic families, fragments remain. Together they form a chilling picture not only of what happened at St. Mary's, but of the deeper institutional failures that enabled it. This was not just a tale of horror within sacred walls, it was a warning about the dangers of unchecked authority, the vulnerability of isolated communities, and the devastating consequences when faith is manipulated by those seeking power. Father Thomas Ryan, whose relentless pursuit brought much of the truth to light, left behind a haunting final journal entry. Remember them. Remember that they lived, that they suffered, and that their suffering mattered. By piecing together their story even imperfectly, we honor his plea, and perhaps we learn something vital about the fragility of trust, the ease of silence, and the vigilance required to protect the innocent from evil disguised in sacred robes. Today, the Wisconsin Historical Society holds a small, restricted archive on St. Mary's, accessible only to credentialed researchers. Among these documents is a water-damaged letter, penned in 1880 by Sister Anne Sullivan, addressed to the adult daughter of Sister Josephine Brady. A child, conceived in captivity, and secretly adopted. The letter was never delivered. Sister Anne couldn't find her. Its final words serve as a powerful eulogy for everything lost. Should you ever learn of your origins, know this: your mother was not shamed, but brave. The evil at St. Mary's was not of God or true faith, but of human cruelty wearing sacred garments. The real convent wasn't the limestone structure, but the sisterhood, women who held hands in the dark, whispered prayers, and remembered each other's names when everything else was stripped away. That is our legacy, not our suffering, but our survival. The tragedy of St. Mary's reveals how the most sacred facades can conceal unimaginable darkness, and how silence, especially institutional silence, can prolong pain long after the crimes are committed. But the story doesn't end there. Years after the scandal first broke, newly uncovered documents revealed that the rot went far beyond the convent walls. Investigations showed corruption reaching across state lines, implicating church leaders, businessmen, and politicians throughout the Midwest. The church, desperate to contain the damage, framed the horror as the work of 3 impostors, but leaked diocesan letters told a different story. Between 1855 and 1858, Bishop Henney received at least 7 warnings alleging disappearances, abuse, and suspicious finances. Each letter was quietly followed by a generous donation from Mother Catherine to his cathedral fund. Nothing was done. One especially damning exchange from 1856 showed a junior priest reporting a bloodstained nun's habit found in the woods near the convent. The bishop's reply: "Return it to Mother Catherine with our compliments, and tell the farmer it was likely red paint from a theatrical performance." Days later, another $500 arrived for the cathedral. Local historian Margaret Holloway recorded her grandmother's memories in 1932, adding another chilling layer. Her grandmother had worked as a servant at a nearby estate. People knew something was wrong at St. Mary's. On quiet nights, you could hear the screams from the north wing. When anyone asked, they were told it was spiritual exercises or penitential prayers, and no one questioned it because Catholic rituals seemed foreign, even mystical, to the Protestant neighbors. So, what do you think? Do you believe the full truth was ever revealed, or are there still secrets buried deep beneath Wisconsin's soil? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you found this story compelling and want more chilling tales from history's forgotten corners, don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this with someone who loves a good mystery. That grandmother used to say the neighborhood children would sprint past the old convent grounds, terrified of the sorrowful women in black who stared from the windows with hollow, empty eyes. In 1890, nearly 30 years after the events at St. Mary's, a frail, elderly woman stepped into the Chicago office of the Pinkerton Detective Agency. She introduced herself as Mary Callahan, sister of the executed James Callahan. In her arms, she carried a worn leather portfolio that she claimed had been hidden by her brother before his arrest. Inside were damning documents, private letters between Mother Catherine and clients from across the country, ledgers detailing financial transactions, and most shockingly a list of prominent clergy and politicians who had either supported or protected the operation. My brother was no innocent, Mary reportedly told the Pinkerton agent, her face marked by the weight of decades carrying such knowledge. He confessed terrible things to me before they hanged him, but he was only a servant in a much larger evil. Before his death, he told me where to find these papers. He made me promise to keep them safe until those truly responsible had met their judgment. Now that they're gone, the truth must come to light. The agent, a devout Catholic himself, was so disturbed by what he read that he bypassed agency protocol and delivered the documents directly to Cardinal James Gibbons in Baltimore. The cardinal responded with a short letter to Mary Callahan, assuring how the matter would be addressed. But no public inquiry ever followed, and the documents quietly vanished into the church's archives. "I have reviewed the materials you sent," Cardinal Gibbons wrote in a personal letter to Mary by her family, "and while I share your horror, I must also weigh the harm public exposure would inflict on the faith of millions of innocent Catholics. Those chiefly responsible have already stood before God. The victims are in His mercy. Perhaps the greatest act of justice now is to bury this darkness and ensure it never rises again." Mary's efforts to make the documents public were repeatedly thwarted. Newspaper editors refused to print her story, citing a lack of evidence. When she attempted to publish the materials as a pamphlet, the printer backed out, reportedly after receiving a visit from men in clerical dress. Her home was broken into twice, though nothing of value appeared to be taken. In 1892, realizing she might never succeed, she entrusted copies of the most critical documents to her nephew with strict instructions: preserve them for future generations. Then, in 1908, a fire broke out in the Baltimore Archdiocese's records room. It destroyed hundreds of historical documents, including, reportedly, the entire Callahan portfolio. Church officials called it a tragic accident, but Thomas Moran, a former diocesan archivist, claimed on his deathbed in 1947 that it had been anything but. I was told to store certain materials together, Moran confessed to his son. It went against every archival protocol. When the fire came, only those shelves burned, nothing else. Draw your own conclusions. The final known chapter of the St. Mary's saga came in 1912, in Veracruz, Mexico. Workers renovating a mansion discovered a hidden room. Inside sat the mummified remains of two elderly women, positioned face-to-face in worn chairs. Among their belongings were Catholic religious items, forged documents under various names, and a large stash of both American and Mexican currency. Most haunting was a small golden locket, holding a miniature painting of St. Mary's Convent as it had looked in the 1850s. The women seemed to have died at the same time, reported La Verda de Veracruz on March 12, 1912. Tea was set before them. The cups held traces of a powerful poison derived from local plants. Whether it was suicide or something more sinister was never determined. When the story reached the United States, several surviving former residents of St. Mary's, now elderly, recognized the items found with the body. They identified them as belonging to none other than Mother Catherine Murphy and Sister Margaret Clark. The women were believed to have died sometime around 1880, spending their final years in secluded luxury, wealthy, but never free from the haunting secrets they carried. The most unsettling discovery was a leather-bound journal found beside their remains. Its pages hinted that their operations hadn't ended with their flight from Wisconsin, but had instead continued in Mexico for nearly 2 decades. Written in the same coded language used in the infamous St. Mary's records, the journal spoke of acquisitions, placements, and special clients. The final entry was dated the presumed day of their deaths. It read simply, "He comes tonight. We have failed him for the last time." Who or what this hymn referred to has never been determined. Was it a flesh-and-blood accomplice, a patron, or something darker, more metaphysical? Scholars remain divided. Some link the note to obscure religious cults that quietly circulated among elite circles in the late 19th century. Others believe it pointed to high-ranking benefactors involved in a human trafficking network, cloaked in the garb of religious service. Investigators searching the women's estate in Veracruz uncovered further horrors. Beneath the garden lay the remains of at least 12 young women, buried across a span of 20 years. Mansion records revealed that these victims had been lured from impoverished families with false promises of housework or religious education, only to meet the same fate as the lost souls of St. Mary's. The evil that began in Wisconsin did not die there. The New York Times wrote in a rare article acknowledging the case, "It simply migrated south, like a cancer searching for new flesh." The Catholic Church's official response was terse. A brief statement confirmed that some of the deceased were once members of a dissolved Wisconsin religious community, but emphasized they had been excommunicated and were no longer under church authority. The trafficking ring, its victims, and the broader implications were left unaddressed. In Milwaukee, a small memorial garden was quietly established in 2010 by an anonymous donor, dedicated to the women of St. Mary's. It bears no official church endorsement and lists no names, but every spring, fresh flowers appear without fail. Some believe they are left by descendants of Sister Mary Collins, the brave nun whose secret notes smuggled out by a farm boy first exposed the nightmare. Independent researchers, delving into the case, have faced bizarre resistance. Church archives locked just before appointments. Research permissions are rescinded without reason. Several investigators have reported disturbing experiences, threatening phone calls, break-ins that targeted only their documents, even shadowy figures trailing them late at night. "Someone still doesn't want this story fully told," wrote historian Rebecca Lawson in her 2003 expose Buried Secrets, the unfinished investigation of St. Mary's. Whether the goal is to shield the descendants of powerful families or preserve institutional reputations, efforts to bury the truth continue even today. The land where St. Mary's once stood has long been reclaimed by time. New homes, new churches, and new lives have sprouted there, unaware of the horror beneath their foundations. But on certain fog-laced autumn nights, Locals say the past stirs. Some claim to hear women's voices softly chanting evening prayers. Others report cries muffled by distance or time. Whether it's the wind playing tricks or echoes from something darker, only the listener can decide. In 2018, during the construction of a new housing development near the old convent site, workers unearthed a small metal box beneath the soil. Inside were a rosary, a nun's veil, and a folded paper listing 23 names. Above them, a single phrase, "Remember us." The items were handed over to diocesan authorities where, according to several sources, they remain today uncatalogued, unavailable to the public, forgotten or perhaps intentionally hidden. The family of Jimmy Fletcher, the young farm boy who delivered Sister Mary's desperate note to Father Ryan, created their own quiet memorial to the victims of St. Mary's. For 5 generations, a small shelf in their farmhouse kitchen has displayed a silver cross, believed to be the very one Sister Mary gave Jimmy in thanks for his bravery. Beside it sits a handwritten list of the nuns' names, carefully transcribed from old newspaper reports and updated each time new details emerged. Great-great-grandpa Jimmy said, "We must never forget those ladies." Current family patriarch Robert Fletcher told a local newspaper in 2020. He said the truth might get buried, but that doesn't make it any less true. Those women lived. They suffered. They mattered. What cannot be denied is that between 1854 and 1862, in the supposedly sacred walls of a Wisconsin convent, human evil reached chilling depths. The very systems designed to protect the innocent instead enabled the unimaginable. And perhaps the darkest horror of St. Mary's isn't just what happened inside those limestone walls, but how swiftly history tried to forget. So remember them, Sister Agnes, Sister Bernadette, Sister Teresa, and all the others. Remember that they lived, remember that they suffered, and remember that their suffering mattered.